Live. And there we are. Let's see. Get this YouTube going on
Am I
this fine
famous?
Monday.
Am I famous now that we're live? My Twitter now says I may or may not be notable. I bet.
What, your verified badge?
Yeah, it says it for everybody. I looked up The Rock because I was like, let me find a celebrity to see who it is, and if it's the same deal, it says the same thing.
Do you get the double
Yeah.
verified
I
badge
just
yet?
clicked on mine. This is a legacy verified account.
Yeah.
It may or may not be notable. Who knows?
Yeah,
Who knows?
Same thing mine says. All the legacy check marks say that.
I definitely didn't buy my check mark. I'm never going to buy a verified badge. I am going to bully Instagram into giving me one to match my Twitter.
It's
now that
hard to get
Twitter's a mess.
verified there.
It is because
Yeah.
I actually been talking to some people. Their whole verified process is through bots. What up, gang? I see y'all in the chat. We're about to start. Without further ado, we're starting this right now at 5:50.
We're doing that Brooklyn Nets talk right here on Talkin Nets. Brooklyn, we go hard. Go hard. Talkin Nets. Hosted by Keith McPherson, Robin Lundberg, and Hudson Flynn.
Yes, sir. Welcome back to Talkin Nets, episode 177. As we proceed now, I know it's been a couple days. I know a lot has happened in the Nets world, but I know one thing. After that big win Saturday night, I thought I was going to wake up Sunday and see ESPN, NBA TV, I don't know, any other sports outlet, FS1, CBS Sports Radio, whatever it might be, talking about, wow, look at the Nets. The Nets are winning games. The last episode we had, I said, winning streak ends, start another one. They start another one, and they rest players, and they still go get a win. Jacques Vaughn is such a difference at head coach versus Steve Nash. They're getting it done without their MVP. KD is playing at an MVP level, but no, we know. Nobody cares about the Nets unless it's some BS. Jared says, that game against the Pacers was one of the best ones I've ever seen. Biggest win of the season. Yeah, well, we're going to get into it. Keith McPherson, Robin Lundberg, Hudson Flynn. Robin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I think a great philosopher once said, keep that same energy, right? And that's what you're getting at a little bit. Though, to be fair, doing what I do for a living, like I get it to a certain extent because the drama and all that sells, whether it's the Nets or somebody else, Baker Mayfield over the offseason in the NFL, that kind of stuff does generate clicks and all that. But it is kind of funny how quiet it's been because I'm not going to throw the C word around and say the Nets are contenders, but I'll throw a Q word around. I think the Nets are quality. And that was a quality win over the Pacers, like you saw up there on the screen. And that's what real teams do. Whether or not they've got their guys, they give the same sense of purpose and sense of direction. And for that, I credit Jacques Vaughn.
Hudson, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Better that the Nets are, believe it or not, 8-2 in their last 10. I think I've said this on the last several episodes, but I'm surprised we're here after the way the season started. All credit to Jacques Vaughn. I think, Keith, you sent out the tweet from Talkin Nets that just said the bubble Nets were back. And that was always a fun energy. And I've always been a fan of the eternal underdog. I'm rooting for Morocco in the World Cup. I always love my Cinderella stories in March Madness. That it's weird to see a Nets Pacers game in 2022 where the Nets are probably should be the underdogs and them come out like that. It was just it's been fun to watch, and the Nets have been a fun basketball team and an unproblematic basketball team to a large extent, which like we've talked about and like we're going to talk about means they're out of the headlines, the Kardashians of the NBA, as I've seen them be called. Nobody cares about the Kardashians now that nobody's talking about Kim now that Kanye is doing what he's doing.
Good comparison with Ben Simmons being linked to Kylie Jenner. They only want to talk about Ben Simmons if he's out with a back injury or a knee injury or if he's progressing slowly, right? Like, oh, Ben Simmons, what a joke. They only want to talk about Kyrie and his shoes. We're, weeks away from, you mentioned Kanye right there. We're weeks away from Kyrie being on the heels of the Kanye stuff, not going backwards, but they only want to talk about Kyrie and New Balance and the tape on his shoes. What else? They only want to talk about KD and his comments about Aaron Judge, right? Oh, KD goes on and says he's a Nationals fan and he doesn't care about 99 at all. That made national news, and that was a joke. And if anyone was watching the post game like I was, Megan Triplett asked him the question, queuing him up for what? Yankees hot stove, which I also watched right after the post game. The Yankees and the Nets play on the same station, Yes Network. That's all TV production. But, KD came out and clarified that came out too cold. But I just think it's interesting, right? When it's nonsense, Nets talk is up there. It's leading everywhere. Everyone's got something to say. Everyone wants to weigh in on Kyrie. But when they're actually doing what they're paid to do, what we want to watch them do and nothing else, play basketball, play good basketball, no matter who's on the floor, it's not a story. It's not a story. Not that important.
It's even my coworkers, right? Like who are constantly sending me disparaging texts when things are going bad with the Nets or when we're in a chat like this one, just not broadcast. But when the Nets are doing well, cricket's there too. KD's just so deadpan. So I get that. Like people took it as an insult, but that's just kind of how he delivers things. And Kyrie, Kyrie's playing hard, playing good defense, happy with Kyrie. But he didn't exactly make a statement with his shoot thing either. Like, oh, I'm finally free from my millions of dollar deal that I had with Nike and the logo you can still see. But here's the thing, guys. You look at the stats and beyond 8-2 in the last 10 games, as Hudson said, all of the numbers are starting to point in the direction of the Nets being a real team. I think they're top 5 in both half-court offense and half-court defense on the season. They are now a legitimately good defensive team. We saw a stat last week, I think, that they have the best 5-man lineup defensively in the entire NBA of guys at least 100
Stat Muse. I meant to throw that in the notes. Keep going. I'll throw it in there, and Alex can add the screenshot. I put a bunch of Stat Muse screenshots in the notes.
Again, I credit Jacques Vaughn for that. I credit the players for that. The rotation is starting to get figured out. The team is starting to get healthy. To me, the two biggest weaknesses are turnovers and second chance opportunities. Because when you look at the basic things, offense and defense, the Nets are excellent. The problem is they don't always complete their defensive possessions because the other team gets a rebound and puts it back up. And they turn the ball over too much, especially when they have like an opportunity to score and it goes the other way. So that leads to the other team getting more shots, having more field goal attempts throughout the game. If they can cut down on those two things, if they can shore up the offensive or the defensive glass, and they can shore up their turnover issues, then I do think you have to start looking at them as one of the 3, 4, 5 best teams in the NBA, as right now they are clearly, I would have them third in the East. I mean, behind Boston and Milwaukee, right there with Cleveland.
When you look at the standings, I know it's too early to call. We haven't even gotten to December or to Christmas. We're only in December. But, like, there's not too many teams that you don't know about. Like, you know what the Sixers are. You know what the Bucks are. You know what the Celtics are. You know who their stars are. You know their style of play. You kind of know how the Nets match up against them. But here we are with a Nets team that when they were losing, when they were under 500, they had all of this attention. Now they're stringing together wins. They're 16-12. They're currently in 4th place, and it's like, let's see how long this continues. Another win streak, like I already mentioned. They're 8-2 in their last 10, winning the last 3 in a row. And now they have a game coming up tonight, and then they don't play until Friday. So, when you think about what Jacques Vaughn and the Nets just did, they made it so that guys can be fresh. And they're not like, they're going to break the rest of this week and not have to play till Friday. And the last game that they played, the top 7 scorers had off. So let's get into it. Last episode we recorded right before the Hornets game. I'm not going to take you that far back. I know it's hard to even think about the game before the last one, but 7-11 combined for 62 points. It was a good start. It wasn't a great finish. As you guys remember, the Hornets kept with the Nets, and they barely won this game by 6 points, 122-116. But whatever, win ugly. We'll take that win. And like the Hornets, we know the Hornets are not a good team. They're not a competitive team. Whatever, a win is a win, and it was part of going 6-1 on this homestand, this 7-game homestand that the Nets had. So then moving on from that game, right? It's a win. It's a win. It's a win. No one's going to remember, oh, well, you gave it back to them in the fourth quarter. They still lost. Then you're facing a Hawks team who had gotten beat by the Knicks in New York a couple days prior. So they were more motivated, right? You got Trae Young on the floor with King of Broadway on his shoes. In my opinion, he embarrassed himself going out there like that, thinking that he owns Madison Square Garden, whatever. They came out with more energy when it was time to face the Nets. The Nets could have lost that game to the Hawks. They didn't lose. It's another win, stacking wins. And then you get to Saturday night, where I refer to this as the bubble Nets, but we've seen so many iterations on this, and I'll pass the mic and I'll try and add anything you guys don't add. When everybody hears that the Nets are sitting their top 7 guys, top 8 guys, I think, if you add TJ Warren into that, everyone's thinking it's a punt game. KD and Royce O'Neal are leading the league in minutes. It was needed to get some type of rest, some type of game off, some type of load management. But the way that the Nets did it, choosing to sit that many guys, calling up G League young guys, the first thing I thought was, okay, there was a stretch of time where the Nets had to go through this last year, right? Whether it was KD and the kids or KD goes out, and now you're relying on Kessler Edwards, Day'Ron Sharpe, Cam Thomas, David Duke Jr. You're relying on rookies last year. These guys had already gone through that, and they're better versions of themselves this year. But I immediately thought Steve Nash did not take that opportunity last year as a time to shine as a coach. The Nets had an 11-game losing streak. KD was able to beat the Sixers with all rookies around him for the most part. But when you are sitting your star players, it is time to see the coach strategize, plan, and prepare a game plan, and then go out there and execute. And that's what they did. Jacques Vaughn took these guys against the Pacers in Indiana on the road, and it didn't matter. So Alex just put up there, the Nets were without 8 players: Nick Claxton, Seth Curry, Kevin Durant, Joe Harris, Kyrie Irving, Royce O'Neal, Ben Simmons, TJ Warren. It didn't matter. They called up Day'Ron, they called up Kessler, and these guys have been playing in the G League. There's just not that much room for them. Patty Mills is another guy that was getting DNPs. And we were all kind of talking about Patty like, well, why did they re-sign him? He's a veteran. What are they trying to do with him? Can't really trade him anywhere. That was a game where you could use him, and he was a great leader there. Markieff Morris, another guy that's like a veteran, a depth piece, but not really moving the needle for anyone. Like, I don't think anyone is looking at Markieff Morris as like, anything besides a glue guy, a role player. He steps up in that game. I think in the notes I wrote that he had 15 points, season high, 10 rebounds, season high. It was his first triple-double, or his first double-double of the season, his first double-double since April 17, 2021 with the Lakers. So he stepped up. Tell me what you guys were thinking Saturday. Saturday, I was at dinner with my wife. I had reservations at 8, so I'm checking the score, and I'm like, they're hanging around. Cam Thomas is doing his thing. Day'Ron Sharpe is doing his thing. Edmond Sumner, don't let me forget Edmond Sumner. I'm looking at the box score. They're down 14, and I'm thinking, all right, well, it was a good fight. And I check my phone again, and I'm like, yo, they came back and won. This is the win of the year, the most unexpected win of the year. Everybody in sports should be talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, I had a party. We had a party at our house. Santa and the Grinch were both here. So I didn't feel like it warranted putting the Nets game on without those guys playing. But I wound up rewatching it at 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And what stood out to me was how quickly they cut that deficit. When they were down 8 in the fourth quarter at some point, something like that. And they came back, which shows the resolve and shows that they were playing hard and they were ready to play again. A credit to the coach. You mentioned Edmond Sumner. I want to give him a special shout out. I think Edmond Sumner is a key player for this team. I really like what he brings. I like the point of attack defense, the length he has defensively, the energy he plays with, the fact that he takes the ball in a straight line drive to the rim. And I mentioned it before. I think we've brought up the Grizzlies on this show a bunch of times about how Ja was out and they kept winning. Real teams have a strategic focus, a strategic purpose that they play with. And over the course of time, the talent deficit is going to show. But in a 1 out of 82 game, if you're playing professionally and bringing it, you can win. So if I'm Sean Marks, the next day I wake up and I give some calls to people. Hey, what do you think about Cam Thomas? You see what he did against the Pacers? That was my initial thought after I saw the fourth quarter of that game.
Yeah, absolutely. That was I was actually going to come in and say, you almost took the words right out of my mouth, that if you want to give credit to anyone in that game, I want you to give it to Jacques Vaughn. I obviously Cam Thomas was the player that put up 33 that ESPN did actually talk about. His highlights were all over my timeline at the very least. I want that to be a good sign for trade negotiations. I want it to be a good sign for trade value, because it is clear that Cam Thomas is an NBA player, is a good NBA player when he is put in a situation where he can be option one. And in this game, he was option one. And that's just not a situation that he's going to be on with this Nets team night in and night out. And coming off the bench, coming in cold, he's not going to be able to do what he did in that game. I don't think there's any reason why teams around the league shouldn't be excited by him. Me personally, I would be excited by him. I'd be through the roof if we had gotten him before we entered this current era of Nets basketball. So I do hope that maybe leads to fielding a couple more trade calls. I saw a lot of people talking about Durant as well, obviously the player that he was drafted with. It's interesting with Durant. The Nets had a couple players in double-digit rebounds, and Kessler had 9. And it was an interesting game to try and have takeaways. With the way the Nets are currently constructed, I can't really see how Durant stays in the G League for much longer. Not necessarily because he's putting up any type of crazy stats. Honestly, mostly just because we need a big body, and if we don't play him in extended minutes, he seems to be serviceable. So I think, honestly, good signs all around. I love having a coach that we can rely on to coach through games. Having a top 5 half-court offense and half-court defense. Those are coaching statistics. That's a coach stat. Sorry, I think, Robin, you want to cut in?
Yeah, real quick, just to go back to the theme that we had at the beginning, people were waiting to jump on the Nets. They were waiting to call it a disgrace and everything that they rested all those guys, because there is a level of vitriol around the team. And, I get it. Somebody that in Indiana goes to that game, they don't get to see KD, they don't get to see Kyrie, they don't get to see Joe Harris, whatever the case may be, but they don't get to see those players. And it got quieted. That's one of the reasons nobody's talking about it, because they would have been talking about it had the Nets lost that game, but instead they won, which I do take as a good sign for the path they're on.
Yeah, and you know what? People can save it with their thoughts on how guys are rested, load management, which games look like punt games, which games are rest games, because the entire NBA does it. And when we talk about star players, I think the biggest person you got to look at with that is Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard as a Clipper. What are Clipper fans saying about him never playing? There's a bunch of other guys too. And it's funny, ESPN wanted to run with LeBron and AD. I saw LeBron and AD talk. Those are two guys that are gone missing a lot, injuries. And then even Zion, his dunk late in the game against the Suns, that was the leading NBA story the next day. Zion missed all of last year. We weren't sure if he was coming back. And he, in his post game, says, hey, this team eliminated my guys last year. I missed all last year. I'm here now. And yeah, those are all great stories. Chris Paul going through it. Rough couple of weeks for Chris Paul. But back to the Nets. Couple of things you guys said.
Speaking of the Kardashians, by the way.
The Kardashian theme is heavy on 177. We'll have to send this to their people. Back on Cam Thomas. A lot of talk about his emotions on the bench. There was a thread in Nets Twitter where they just, they showed the team celebrating, and he just had a straight face on. We know Cam wants to play. He played last year. He's used to being the bucket getter, the star. He's used to playing and shooting and getting his, and there's a lot of guys in front of him. But I think it's interesting right now, and this will lead into the John Collins, Joe Harris talk. As we're looking at the Nets as a contender, as we're looking at the Nets as a team that might be able to make a playoff push and run this year, they're a trade or two away, and that they do have this deadline. And I look at this deadline as like, Sean Marks, your job is on the line to try and get a piece to make this team a contender this year that could potentially get to, I don't know, an Eastern Conference Finals. Like, if this is the last year of KD and Kyrie, as most of us see it as, then they got to get further than they have in the last 3 seasons. They got to get out of the second round. And Cam Thomas could be a piece, but there's some thought to, KD likes him. And if he stays, right, he's the future. But there's also, like, Hudson said, what team couldn't use a Cam Thomas that's young right now? You can go back to that. That's young right now. And as trade talks are swirling around, Shams put out, the Hawks have had several teams in the Collins market, such as Utah, Washington. Speaking of Utah, shout out to Utah Watanabe coming back as well Saturday against the Pacers. But Washington was in, Brooklyn and Dallas. Atlanta has not shown interest so far in a potential framework that would include Brooklyn's Joe Harris. Colin is in second year of a 6-year, $125 million deal. Joe Harris, I think, makes like $25 million a year or something like that, $20 or $25 million.
We just had this whole convo, 18.5 million a year.
That's too much. I mean, for most people, the Nets paid him because they had to pay him. But I know most people are looking at this version of Joe Harris, Joey Buckets now, and they're saying, I don't know if we're going to take on that guy in any package just because of the hit. 18.5 million for a guy that's like, I don't know if he's a starter in this league anymore. He's an off the bench shooter. What are you guys thinking about the John Collins rumors now? 2 weeks of that. Joe Harris, his trade potential, which I don't know how much there is, and what the Nets need to do here. Cam Thomas, going back to another thing you said, Day'Ron Sharpe. They were counting on Day'Ron Sharpe in the beginning of this season, which leads me to believe they will go back to him. I think he needed to go to the G League, work out. Even looking at him in the post-game press conference, his face looks slimmer to me. Like, I think he's been hitting the weights, and he said he's been hitting the weights running and working out hard. I think he's been trying to get back. So a good showing by him. Maybe they will get him some minutes. He can't be a 20, 30-minute guy, but maybe he can be 10 to 15. What are you guys thinking about Cam, Day'Ron, Joe Harris, John Collins in the potential trade market?
I think any move the Nets make is likely going to be on the margins because they just simply don't have much to give up. We talk about Joe Harris as a central piece. You're talking about the three guys, I think, who are most likely to be dealt rather than filler, but like as a part of the deal, a central part of the deal. Joe Harris, who has played better lately. Let's give him credit. He's made some shots. I don't personally trust him to be in the rotation of a contending team until proven otherwise. Cam Thomas, who, like Hudson mentioned, he's the kind of guy that needs to go to like the Orlando Magic or one of those kind of teams, right? Where he can get a ton of burn. So maybe you could get some sort of value. And then you always have to keep at least one eye open. I think he would appreciate that reference for Kyrie Irving, considering he is, in the last year of his deal. But I think we're getting more and more likely that they're just going to run that until the wheels fall off and see how far they can go in that respect. Beyond that, I'd have to look at their draft capital and situation. The Philly pick, I think they could deal this year. That's something they can move. But you're probably looking at a smaller deal, I think, for the Nets than a bigger deal to sort of shore up the rotation on the margin. Because we're now getting fairly deep into guys that you at least relatively trust, right? KD, Kyrie, Claxton, Simmons, Royce, Watanabe,
Utah,
Sumner.
Edmund Sumner.
Yeah, I just mentioned. Then the other surprise wild card to look for would be Nick Claxton, simply because he and Ben Simmons aren't a perfect fit. Simmons, there's a lot more invested in him going forward, and he's harder to move. So if any move was just going to like shock us, that would be the move I think that would shock.
Seth Curry? Anyone think Seth Curry has any value out there?
More than Joe Harris.
Yeah, he's been more consistent, right? If he's healthy, he's been more consistent, right? So you got to give him that. I agree. I think a move on the margins is likely unless Sean Marks is genuinely feeling pressure from Joe Tsai. If Joe Tsai says, this is our last burn, this is our last run, your job's on the line, I can understand the desire from him to take a big swing. But I expect an addition, probably something closer, and again, hopefully something closer to PJ Tucker on the Bucks in 2011. If you guys, obviously, if you remember the series when the Nets played the Bucks, he continued to be a menace, but he was also a good basketball player. Believe it or not, he was traded for Rodions Kurucs that year of Nets fame. But that kind of a move on the margins for a player that fills a specific role that the Nets maybe don't have. The Nets have a lot of shooters, for instance, but we do not have a secondary big. Everybody talks about that. That might be a little harder to come by. But do you have someone who's, as the phrase goes, has that dog in him, a little bit of the Bruce Brown energy, which I know Bruce was maybe more expensive than we were willing to pay for, but Bruce Brown would still be a good person to have on this team regardless. So I think that's the kind of move that actually would probably make the Nets not only make the most sense, but probably improve them the most, because at the end of the day, you have to, and based on the way the team is constructed, you have to rely on the fact that you can have Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and Ben Simmons, playing the majority of your star level minutes. So you can't really hope for someone like John Collins, especially with the season he's having, to come in and solve all of the problems and be a fourth star to our theoretical big three.
It's fun to win games. It's fun to talk about the Nets winning. It's fun to talk about a Nets team that has depth, a Nets team that we're looking at and we're laughing as they're able to pull off a win Saturday with not rookies, second-year players, young guys, a couple veterans in the mix. They're able to get a win, and it's about stacking wins. This year, I've been on record saying this. I think this is the best roster that KD has been a part of as a Brooklyn Net. And this year, to me, is about convincing KD, hey, you can win here. Like, you should stay and finish out your contract, and we'll keep building around you. We'll keep making trades, moves, signings to build around you. You're the guy. Now, speaking of him being the guy, he's playing at an MVP level. KD this season, you guys can see it right on the screen. Averaging 37-5, 56, 34, and 92 percentage. Like, he's so efficient. You don't even need to talk about that. It's known. His field goal percentage. He's fourth in the East, leading the league in points, leading the Nets in points and assists. He's building an MVP case. Could you imagine KD winning an MVP in Brooklyn? I'm just saying, it's out there. KD knows he's the guy, and he knows that he is able to do what he's been doing. And he's also keeping it going with his charity work. I think it's important to note, right? They're playing the Wizards tonight. He's going back to D.C. in Maryland, where he's from. I don't know if you guys know anything about Bowie State. I think it's a black school. I don't know if it's an HBCU, but it's a predominantly black school. And Kevin Durant's foundation is sending $500,000 to transform their basketball gym and the school's athletic programs. $500,000 goes far at a school like that. I actually used to play football with the guy that went on to coach at Bowie State. And I think it's not far outside of Baltimore
I'm pretty sure it's Bowie State. I went to University of Maryland. And
is it Bowie?
I
always
say
it's Bowie. It's in Bowie, Maryland.
It depends on the accent. Depends on the accent.
It's in PG County, which is right outside of DC. It's a very demographically speaking, a very high percentage black demographic that lives there. I think it might actually be the most affluent black county in the country. It's up there somewhere like that. But PG
Cook
County
just said oldest HBCU in Maryland. I didn't know if it was an HBCU. I don't know if there's qualifications.
It's one of the oldest in the country too, actually.
Bowie State. So the Bowie State Bulldogs. Kevin Durant didn't go there, but he's a Maryland guy and he is doing things for his hood where he's from and a school there. I appreciate that. I enjoyed seeing that news come through because he's helping where he's from, not forgetting where he's from, and they're going back there. I expect him to ball out tonight as the Nets try to keep their winning ways going. KD in the last 12 games. I mean, the Nets are 9-3 in their last 12 games. KD is averaging 30, 7 rebounds per game, 6 assists per game. 60% of his field goals are going down. You have one of the best players in the world on this team. This is the best roster you've had around one of the best players in the world. Nets fans, we've been through enough. We're just hoping nothing screws this shit up. We're just hoping that there's nothing that pops up like an injury or off the field stuff or off the court rather stuff pops up. Like, keep it going so we can keep winning. I know it's not even Christmas yet, but it feels good for the Nets to be in the position they're in, 4th seed right now. I know it doesn't matter about the standings, but a few games over 500, another win streak started. And if you can pull up the Nets Daily tweet, no, I don't know how y'all feel about Nets Daily, but reasons for optimism. The Nets have played 28 games, most in the East, 3 more than the Bucks or Sixers. Their remaining schedule is the 6th easiest in the NBA. Of their 14 back-to-backs this season, they've already played half of them. So their opening month was the toughest in the NBA. They're healthy. They got through that. So all of these things are lining it up, Nets fans, for this to be potentially the most fun season of the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving era, and it's the actual end of that era as we know it. I just don't believe they're going to re-sign Kyrie unless Joe Tsai sells the team. So that's why I've been speaking on this like it's finite and like they need to be all in. And that's what we've wanted, right? This was supposed to be a run it back, all in for this last year. Get the most that you can out of this last year. And I think they're effectively doing that.
Well, you see, Miguel Gonzalez writes in, do not ever trade 7, Nets legend. I am increasingly grateful for Kevin Durant being on this team. I think through everything we've been through, watching them and all the trials and tribulations and drama and all that, it can make you emotional at times. And you can react out of emotion. But I mentioned this a few episodes ago, taking my son to the game, him copping he didn't cop it, but him getting the KD jersey that I copped for him.
If he had money, he probably would have.
He loves it. He's wearing it right now at a basketball clinic right at this very moment. So, that the fact that one of the greatest players of all time plays for the Nets is something that should be appreciated. His jersey is likely to go up in Barclays. He's the best player. If he stays for this contract, you might be able to say he's the best player in franchise history or right there with Jason Kidd, right? And the guys that came before him. So I do think building around him is prudent. The one thing I'd love to see is him outplay Jason Tatum in one of those games when they're head-to-head. But I think the ideal scenario, to be honest, is you have to realize also where KD is at in his career. So he's playing like a top 5 player this season, but I think you can expect him to be a top 10 player throughout the duration of this contract or something to that effect. The ideal situation would be a young buck coming up as KD is coming down a little bit. Kyrie, yeah, there you go. Bucket getter Cam Thomas. Kyrie's the best candidate at the moment, obviously, and raises the Nets ceiling the most. But like you mentioned, we don't know what his future holds. I guess the best candidate on the roster remains, it's not the prototypical star, probably remains Simmons. I mean, he's 26 years old. I just don't know how much. Let me ask, Hudson, how much faith do you have in Ben Simmons? Like, where are we at with the Ben Simmons deal now as far as like what he can ultimately bring?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you said that you want the young buck to come up, as KD ages, and mostly because they've been in the news lately, I was thinking of David Robinson and Tim Duncan, right? Obviously, that's about as amazing Hall of Fame as you can get from that kind of a situation, and that's not going to be Ben Simmons by any stretch of the imagination. But there is a lot to be said, frankly, for the kind of impact that a great player as they go out can have on a younger player. And I want to give Kevin Durant, the credit to say that he can do something with helping Ben Simmons come along in his career. I don't know what to think, quite frankly. I think if we get the Ben Simmons, if he manages to regress to his mean, which his mean has been over his career when he's been playing quite good, then we're in a much better situation. I don't think that's something that happens this year. But, I have to be, and with this Nets team and with the core that we have and all the things we've been through, like Robin talked about, I feel like I have to be an eternal optimist with this team. I have to be positive and forward looking and have faith in the fact that, look, getting Ben Simmons as a part of that James Harden trade with everything surrounding him, everything that they knew that was going on with him, I can't allow myself to think that was just a bad call or a mediocre call. At best, I want to think that it's a good call. And so I'm going to give him as much time as it takes. And until he shows that he is not going to be that guy, he's going to stop growing. He's going to stop, returning to the form that he once had. I'm going to give him faith, and I'm going to hope that he can be that guy for KD.
A lot of it is health with Ben too. If you're not healthy, you can't be the version of yourself you want to be. And he's spoken about the disconnect between his mind and his body. So we just got to hope he stays healthy. And then he can be out there getting more reps and playing. This is a guy that didn't play for 2 years. This is a guy that missed a lot of time, and we can't forget that we've been patient with him, but I think he'll be all right in the long run. This is all about playoffs. They've already spoken about this. Like Jacques Vaughn even said with TJ Warren, we're not in a rush. We want him to be able to contribute in the playoffs. No one's dumb here. Everybody understands, right? This is all for April, May, and maybe into June. Right? It's all about that. We know we're in December as well. That's why they're resting guys. Last thing on the Pacers, man, that was the 4th time that the Nets played the Pacers already in this early season. So I guess they figured like they seen them enough. We know what to do against them. Tip my cap to Jacques Vaughn, but that was all Cam. Cam had 21 points in the 4th quarter, a career high. 33 late in that game. And that's him showing who he is. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if the Nets want to keep him or they want to shop him or what becomes. But you know what? It's fun to be a Nets fan while they're winning and while they're doing it with different guys on the floor than you expect. You look forward to this Wizard game tonight. They've already played the Wizards 3 times. I think this is the 3rd time they faced the Wizards. I know they faced them and beat the brakes off them last time in DC. It was the
They
worst
just played
loss.
them. That was the game I was at. The Wizards.
So this is the 3rd time they've played them. They played them in Brooklyn, beat them when Robin was there with his son. And when they went to see them the first time in DC, it was the all-time worst loss, 128-86 that's ever happened there. I think they win tonight, and it'll be good to see Kyrie, KD, the rest of the guys back on the floor. Then they get a few days off, and they'll be back on the floor Friday against the Raptors, who they've also seen at least twice. I want to say they've seen the Raptors 3 times. Maybe going. Yeah,
they've beaten the
the
Raptors
4th
3 times.
They've beat the Raptors 3 times. This will be the 4th time that they face the Raptors. So when they're talking about like the strength of schedule and the rest of the road, and I saw Miggs in the chat with his Jets fan and Mets fan PTSD. He's like, I don't want to hear about strength of schedule. Yeah, because the Mets had the easiest September that anybody in baseball had, and they slept on their opponents and they got knocked down a little bit. You got to still go out and compete and win the games, but you feel good about that with the team that they have. All right, that's all we've got. Anything else, Robin or Hudson, that you'd like to add? I think we can try and come back with an episode Friday or maybe Thursday, just so we can get 2 in this week. But like I said, they're off for the next couple of days. They got a game tonight, and then they don't play again until Friday.
I know. I'm happy we're talking about a pretty good team, and I'll be completely blunt and honest with y'all. I was worried that we were going to be the "this is fine" meme the entire season or until
that was
everything.
Last year. That was me doing this show last year, like trying to talk everybody off the ledge, and there was no way. It was cooked the whole year.
But at least I think what we're going to see is a competitive team for the rest of the year that's going to be in the playoffs and is going to represent itself well in the playoffs.
Yeah, and the look ahead, not even as far as to the playoffs, is still fun. I think. I mean, we have a couple easier games, our next 3, and then we go and we play some top teams. We got the Bucks, we got Cleveland, and we have the Warriors, which 14 and 13 may not be a top team in the league, but they still have the players to be that, right? So I think the Nets are in the near-term future going to be carrying a pretty nice-looking winning streak in their last 10, going up against the teams that they are going, the caliber of team, at least with the Warriors, and the teams literally that they are going to need to beat if they are going to do anything in the playoffs this year. So I think as a Nets fan, you have not only a lot to look forward to in terms of the playoffs and how we might grow to them, but also just a lot of fun basketball to look forward to, which is for all the stuff that surrounds the Nets. And, we started the podcast, and the title of the podcast is No One's Talking Nets Now, because nobody likes to talk about the Nets when everything is basketball and everyone's winning. But at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. We're not here for the drama. We're here to watch the Nets play good, competitive, exciting basketball and win basketball games. And I'm thrilled, honestly, that we're going to be in a position to do that going forward.
Right. Well said, Hudson. That's why you have a Nets podcast, because we're not like the traditional media, the national media, or even the local media that's dominated by Knicks fans. We're here to talk about the Nets, and it's good to get back to talk about winning and players and stats and perspective and trades and potential for this team to be a good team that can make a run through the playoffs. Subscribe to the pod. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that. And if you're in the chat right now on YouTube, click like on your way out. That's all we've got. I know Robin's got to go. I got to go. Hudson's got to go. Talking Nets, you know how we end these shows. Let's go Nets. Let's go Nets. Bro.